My name is Mads Palsvig. I'm a former investment banker and chairman of the Danish political party JFK21. And with me I have my good friend Henning Witte, who is in the board of the Swedish political party Populisterne. And we haven't seen each other for a couple of years, but we have a lot in common, I think.
Yes.
We're freedom fighters, and we're both very interested in money creation, and that's what I would like to talk about first a little bit. So Henning, you have started, the most important part of your political party was the money creation. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I call it the White School of Economics. I wrote a book in my mother tongue, German and Swedish, 2010, how to reform the banking system. And the main topic is to take the power from the private banks to make money themselves, to issue money themselves. They can do it, the digital money. Most people only look to coins and paper money, the cash. But this is in Sweden less than 2% now. Sweden is very, very hostile against cash.
To tell us a little bit, how is money created?
Yeah, money is created mainly by the private banks issuing loans. And people think, oh, they get the money from the central banks or from the deposits from private or companies, persons. But no, they create it out of nothing, just by writing it in their bookkeeping. And the balance sheet is very special in banks, not as usual companies. They have a prolonged balance sheet and they are cheating. So it's very easy. They don't have to have the money. They even can take those credits they issue as a kind of deposit they have for the Basel III rules, for the reserve rules. It's very stupid. First I didn't want to believe it when I heard about it in the 2005-06. And then I wrote a letter to the central bank in Sweden in summer 2010 and asked, is it right that the private banks issue money, digital money, by giving credits? Yes, they said. It is worse than you think.
and why is it a problem that the private banks issue the money? They know more about money than ordinary citizens, so why shouldn't it be those people who are doing it?
It's a problem because nobody is controlling them. They are making as much money as they want, and there is a problem that they make money not only for the usual economy, for the gross national product, but even for the what is it, the gambling,
speculation, maybe.
Yeah, also the derivatives.
Derivatives, yeah.
And if you look totally on the world, there is about 300 times more money in the world than the gross national product, because they are making gambling on higher prices, lower prices, and so on. And this has nothing to do with the work of people. I say, in earlier times we had gold backing up money. That was not so bad because there you had the stability. The problem is not everybody has gold, not every country has gold, and the richest are always sitting on the gold and silver. And therefore, because you have so little there, you have deflation problems. And then the gold was abolished before, some months before World War I, because those who made the war knew that will not be sufficient. And then it came a new level that you make money by making loans. But this is also bad because there you have inflation problems. And I say you must back up money with work, with human work, because the meaning of money is to pay people for making a work that is good for the society.
Have someone ever done that before? Has there ever been a money creation system where they back money by working?
And nobody has asked for it in the theory. Therefore some people say you could earn a Nobel Prize for this, because nobody has gone out and made a theory about it, as I did in my White School of Economics. And this book in German was written by a friend in Switzerland for me in 2010, and we know each other since 2003 and have met each year at least once. And he started an initiative in Switzerland 2014 for an inquiry. In Switzerland you can collect 110,000 voices, and then you force the parliament to take that issue.
Are you talking about Christoph Flüger?
No, Ewald Kornmann. But Flüger could be one of them. There were three. And so this book was partly the brainer for them to start this initiative. And then the establishment in Switzerland tried everything to postpone it, max 4 years. So in June 2018 they had this voting. But only 50% of the Swiss people participated, and only 25% voted in favor of this solution, because there was a huge advertising and kind of mind control from the mass media participating with the politicians, and of course even the chief of the central bank in Switzerland. He would gain power by my reform and those, but it didn't help. But anyhow, in Switzerland, even people in school buses, pupils, discuss this kind of new money, that only the central bank is issuing the digital money as they do with the coins and paper money, the cash. Because then you have, at least in the theory, one part, theory, the people controlling. We say we must have every 6 years an election for the board, for the central bank. It must not be placed by the government as it is today.
So you're talking about having a fourth power instead of the...
Exact, the money issuing power, as Bernd Senf in Germany is calling it. He was the first calling for that, this money issuing power. Our constitution is from the 1700 something, from Montesquieu, with three powers: the judges, the parliaments, and the politicians, the government. This is old-fashioned. We must at least have split it into four.
So the fourth power, the monetarist power, who should that be appointed or elected, or how should that work?
As I said, it should be the central bank, because they already handle the cash, and then we suggest every 6 years there are central banks elections for the whole people.
And how would it work for the banks if the central bank are issuing all the money? How would the banking system work? Would there still be privately owned banks?
Yeah, sure. They have to do what every people think today. They have to loan the money from the central bank or from the deposits of their clients. And then they take from the clients, they give to the clients 1% interest, and they take 2% interest from the new loans, and this margin is what they can earn. So everybody thinks it's today, but it isn't. So there shall be, and we shall not make, like in communism, make every bank under the control from the state. Only the central bank, and only the central bank, there you vote the whole nation every 6 years, or every 4th year you can change.
So all the assets should be backed 100% by
work, because the central bank is only allowed to give money to the government when they have a project where people are working, which is good for society. And by that you reduce the derivatives, this gambling market from the private banks. And more important, you take the power from the private banks, because those guys issuing money in Sweden, 96%, they have the power. They say to the politicians what to do. They have the secret banking power. And not only that, they control the secret services. For example, Mossad is controlled by the bank house Rothschild, and the CIA by the bank house of Rockefeller. So then it is getting better on earth if you take the power from the private banks issuing money. And the central bank, when they give money to the state for new air force or for new bridges or whatever, new hospitals, they must not give it in form of loans, but in form of grants, not demanding the money back and not demanding interest on it. So easy it is. And that means the people can keep their money which they worked for. Today, every money you get is coming from a loan, and it means you must pay it back. Perhaps not you personally, but somebody else. That's totally crazy.
And what about the interest?
I said no interest because it's a grant.
But at the moment, then you have to pay back the loan plus the interest, right?
Yeah, then you have special rules for the adapting time when you change the system. And there, I earlier suggested that the private banks have to loan from the central bank what they cheated. and then they have to pay interest on it and give it to the people back. But now it is so horribly that there is so much debt.
We should probably wait for the
we should
ambulance driving by now. One moment. We'll just have a short break for that. Otherwise, we don't think about it, but we have to wait for the ambulance.
You have to make a cut, I think. Perhaps 60% of every loan is disappearing and the rest is to be paid, because if you say everything is gone, then those guys who were more honest and did not take so much loans are in the disadvantage.
But at the moment, the banks, due to fractional reserve banking, they can leverage, so they can lend out the same money many times, and they have a lot of profit on that. And if they only can lend the money out once, how are they going to survive? Will there be enough money for the banks? Can they still survive?
Yes, sure, but perhaps not so many. But it's always somebody who wants to deposit money and who wants to get an interest for it. For example, when getting older for the children's university, and therefore the private banks get money in and they can lend it out for a higher interest, or they go to the central bank and lend money for quite low rate, and then they go out to the public with a little higher interest rate. That's quite okay. But they are not issuing the money any longer. And in Sweden we have a constitution which says clearly it's the central bank dealing with money, and they mean cash, and everything else has to be, concerning money, has to be ruled by a law. And therefore in 2012 I made a litigation against Wallenberg's SE-Bank. Wallenberg is the most mighty people in Sweden and partly in Europe. It's the richest industry family in Europe, and they are controlling Ericsson and so on. That means our communications. And I said, I don't give you back the money because you cheated me. Your money is false money, it's unlawful money. And then the court in Norrköping had to cheat, and they quoted another rule which I did not quote from the constitution and let me lose the case.
What was that rule?
The rule that the central bank is making cash. But I didn't talk about cash because they didn't want cash from me, they didn't want digital money from a credit card from me. So they had to cheat because it is by law very clear. And I did not get access to the higher courts because the courts are under my control and they cheat. Then I helped other people with this argument. Nobody succeeded, and I finished with only ghostwriting to the courts, so that the client wrote as if it was their paper, but it didn't help. All the courts, I know about 5 litigations now in Sweden, they never succeeded. And in the United States, in the early 90s, as far as I remember, there was also a lawyer specialized on banking law, as I am, since 1990. And he succeeded in the first instance. But 1 month later, the judge was found dead on the road. And then the Court of Appeal took away the judgment. So they didn't succeed either. Okay, and that repeat again, that judgment was? Also, the court in America, I don't recall the state, they said, yes, you are right, the private banks do not have the right to issue money, digital money, because in the US Constitution it is the Treasury issuing the money. What Kennedy did, he started to issue dollars backed on the silver they had in the Treasury, $10, and then he got killed, and the first thing Lyndon B. Johnson did in the Air Force One to stop the printing of the $20 bills from Kennedy, backed up by silver and not by the privately owned Federal Reserve. Yes, and another question, so if at the moment the banks are leveraging due to the fractional reserve banking, and that way are creating a lot of loans and therefore creating a lot of money, and if we have a different system like you suggest, backed by work,
and 100% backed by real value, what will happen with the overall size of the monetary base? Won't it go down?
Yes, sure. Because now it's 300% more than gross national product. It will only be so much as people are working.
And what will happen with the house prices, the equity prices, and the growth in society?
Yeah, they will go down because in this system, it is very easy to earn money because you don't have any taxes. The taxes are coming from the central bank directly to the government, and nobody has to pay taxes. And imagine that, the industry will come to Sweden very quickly, and people can spend the money. That means you earn, because you don't pay taxes and have other stupid things taking money from you. And that means you have very good conditions. So if you are a good worker, within 5-6 years you have enough to buy a house. You don't need the loans. My grandmother said, we never took a loan in old Germany before World War I. It is horrible to take loans. And they also could buy houses or dwellings and things like that. So if you want to have quick money, okay, you can go to the private banks and loan something, but everything will be reduced, that it is not the usual thing that you loan money.
And what will then happen with the people who just bought a flat in Stockholm for 30 million kroner?
Yeah, that's a problem. And there
have you got any ideas how to...
as I told, one should make a cut to say 60% are disappearing, but you still have your 40% to pay.
So you're going to let them off some of that debt, you think?
Yes, because now in the whole world there's so much debt, nobody can pay it back. Not the governments, not the municipalities, not private people, not companies. You must make a cut. When I wrote my book 11 years ago, I did not want it because I thought it's not okay to the people who did not take loans. But now you have such a mess, you must make a cut, but not totally.
Because there's been a lot of people over the last 10 years who have been saying we're going to have another crash, it's going to be worse than 2008. And what actually has happened in reality is the house prices have doubled or tripled and equity prices keep going up. Can this continue? Do you have an explanation why the market hasn't crashed over the last 10 years? Why is that?
Yeah, it is because they cheated as usual. They have always to cheat, they are criminals. And in this
How
case,
do they cheat? What do they do?
In this case, they cheated with the rules from the central banks. The central banks are not allowed to finance the state. In the European Union, we have a bylaw, nobody knows it, saying clearly the state is not allowed to loan or get money from the central bank because they want it from the private banks, there they earn. But now they circumvented it, and the central banks are issuing a lot of money to the states by buying state obligation on the second-hand market. But this is not allowed. In Germany, they had problems with the Constitutional Court. But anyhow, they do that. And for the first time, the central banks issue money not as loan, but as purchase prices. And they purchase stocks from the multinational companies because they are under the control of the negatives, of the Rothschilds, the Wallenbergs.
What central banks buy stocks directly from the multinational corporations? Yeah. Which central banks are you talking about?
Federal Reserve, the central bank in Europe, in Frankfurt, the ECB, and others. And here in Sweden, the Riksbank. And that is not allowed. But in that way, they do what I suggest, that they give money into society without being a loan, in this case a purchase price. So they are not demanding it back and there's no interest on it. Then of course you can supply all the time with money.
So the central banks right now are issuing a lot of money and they are supporting the equity market and the house prices. I remember, I believe it was around 2005, or certainly just before the financial crash in 2008, Ben Bernanke, he went out publicly admitting that Federal Reserve was behind the crash in 1929. So they are not afraid of crashing the market. So why haven't they done it now? What do you think?
Because they know that the times are going to finish, where they can cheat the people like that, and they want to have this Ponzi scheme. It's a Ponzi scheme, as long as possible to cash in. And it is a Ponzi scheme because you need always people to take new loans. Otherwise it's not going, because it's by loan money is coming in. And therefore you had the subprime loan crisis in the States in 2004, 5, 6, where people got money, loans, who were not supposed to get it, because they needed to get it out that the system is not collapsing.
So what do you think is going to happen over the next year or two with the money creation, the size of the monetary base, the house prices and equity prices? What is your guess over the next year or two?
It is very difficult. I was wrong years ago when I said it has to crash. And it didn't crash, because they cheated.
Nobody knows what's in their mind, right? Nobody knows, right?
Well, one of the Rothschilds said we lost the control. It's the first time we lost the control over the financial system. We said it 2 years ago.
Okay.
And there is some truth in it.
So there's some people who are fighting, in the higher echelons we don't know about. Is that what you think is going on?
Yeah. But it's very difficult. And now they are talking about the quantum financial system and the Nezara Egezara, but this is, I think, controlled opposition, because they want to go back to the gold.
Maybe could you quickly just explain to our viewers what Nezara and Gezara is all about in theory, right?
In theory, it is that you back money again with platinum and gold, and then you go back to the gold level, and this is not good, because who is already sitting on the gold and silver and platinum? Yeah, those who are already rich. That means you don't take the power from them, but you make it a little bit more honest.
So the gold system is more honest, but the problem is that the same people who are controlling the monetary base right now, they also control the gold.
Yeah.
So we're back to square one in a way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in theory, that what they wanted in Switzerland, and what I advised to do, is to nationalize even the digital money. But then people say, well, you have crooked people sitting in the central banks now. Yes, that's right. And therefore I say we must make elections. But then they say, of course, it's right, that is a risk. They cheat with the elections and so on, as I did in the United States. But I say, at least in theory, we should at one time demand something which is good. And this is the fourth manual issuing power in the democracy.
And also, I think one step in the right direction is that we are talking about these things, and when more people realize the money creation, then maybe we could have a public demand.
Yeah, because we make our world here with our mind, with our thoughts, collectively. And the more people collectively say, this we don't want, then it stops, because we create with our thought, with the scalar waves and the thoughts, our world, and the whole universe is created by scalar waves. That is God's tool, and therefore you can shield against them, because He wants always contact with you. And this is used in mind control.
Before we go into that area, I just also want to touch on, I know you wrote about the Austrian city Wörgl.
Yes.
Can you explain a little bit about what they did there?
This, as I in the beginning said, short before World War I broke out, they had to change the system, because they knew the gold would not be sufficient for all the weapons and so on. So then they started with this cheating system, and it was after World War I a big lamentary, because in Germany and Austria people gave the gold to the states to buy weapons and so on, and there was nothing, and they had to starve. My father had not enough food after World War I and so on. In Hanover, there was a huge shortage, and then they said, okay, if you think on the gold level, the rich people withhold the gold, they don't need it, we must start a system that the gold is circulating. Money must circulate, and therefore they had interest in the other way. If you sit on the money, you have to pay interest to the society, and therefore it was circulating.
How did they do that in practice?
They controlled, and people understood, and the money was circulating in Wörgl, this Austrian town, and it was a success, and it was cut and shut down by the Central Bank of Austria. They didn't like that, but I say I say that the verbal system is in theory not good, because one important issue for money is you can save it for your children or your pension and so on. And in this way, you can't save money. So you take one of the most important tasks from money away by this verbal system. So this is stupid also. In my system, it's better.
But could you use verbal money to buy assets with it, and then you can save those assets maybe?
Yeah. The problem is also it's only in verbal. And you have today a lot of towns with regional money, and that is good. But you can't use it in a wider perspective and not internationally.
For export and import,
yeah.
International trade, yeah. Okay. So what's your view on taxation? Yeah, you mentioned before that there will be no taxes. So how can you pay for the public sector without taxes?
Well, the central bank is paying, and only if people are working for it. So you have always a correspondence between work and money supply, and therefore no inflation, no deflation.
So the government could create the money and pay for the work created in society.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Very easy.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Henning. That's great. Let's move on to the next topic. We can talk about. There are so much stuff I want to talk to you about. We are also at the moment. We see this war between. I believe you could even say good and evil powers. Where
it's between the devil and God.
Yeah, I think so. And you can have. You have one group of people who clearly are afraid of the vaccines and against all the rituals, the mask and everything, and the other group who says, no, we'll just do what the government tells us, they know better, so that's one part of it, the mind control, and then you have all these patents maybe out there, and some people are talking about the 5G, some people are talking about the vaccines. So can you explain me a little bit, explain the viewers and us a little bit about what is mind control? How do they do it, and do they do it, and why do they do it? I mean, it's a huge question.
Mind control wants to change your thinking, that somebody overrules your thinking process. And in the old times already, when the pharaohs were there 3,000 years ago, they made it in a very brutal way. They tortured, especially children, very horrible.
So, tortured who?
Children.
Children, yeah.
But even adults, so that you got split personalities, multi-personality disorder, they call it in psychiatry today. Then they have a technology, and that is not a human technology, to program by hypnosis those split personalities. And you can split up to 16 or more.
Is this like what they call MK Ultra, that like
no,
the CIA?
No,
it's not that. No.
This is the old-fashioned way, and this has been always, especially in noble families and royal families and so on. The problem is this programming with hypnosis, when you make it with children, is coming to an end when you are 20 or 30, and then they had to kill the people. And there's the same with Michael Jackson. There it held a little bit longer, but when his mind control programming fall away, because he was horribly abused by his father and others as a child sexually, and then he wanted to start to speak out, and then they killed him. But this is the old-fashioned one. But then there came a new-fashioned one, also not human technology, but they introduced it in the concentration camps under Hitler and Japan. Mengele. They made what is it? They made experiments with humans, and there they used drugs and then also beams, secret beams, and this what I said, the Tesla waves, the scalar waves.
So is that electromagnetic frequencies?
No, exactly not.
No?
Because electromagnetic waves have other qualities. Our body has no antennas for electromagnetic waves, only for scalar waves. Therefore you have these tin-foiled heads, because a little minority of the mind-controlled people, they let know them, because they need to train their computers to fight against it, the awakening. and that they feel, oh, somebody's beaming me, it's my neighbor or whatever, gang stalking, the typical things. And then they think if they are beaming me, they are taking electromagnetic waves, and therefore I take a foil or lead or whatever, which is helping against electromagnetic waves. But in this case it doesn't, because they don't use electromagnetic waves. They use scalar waves, and those waves are a secret still today. And the professors in physics are very stupid, because James Clerk Maxwell already in the mid-1900s, also 1860, made those Maxwell equations. I learned them in school. And the third Maxwell equation is saying what a wave is. And he says the wave has two parts, a scalar wave part and electromagnetic part. And then in 1888, Heinrich Hertz in Germany, in Karlsruhe, came and said, hello, yeah, I found the electromagnetic wave. It was right. And then pupils to Maxwell and other physics professors said, oh, look, now we found the electromagnetic wave, but not the scalar wave. Maxwell was wrong. We changed this equation and put the part for the scalar waves to 0, which means also the magnetic part is 0. And there is there are no magnetic monopoles. That is physically the same result of putting this part to 0. But then, 10 years later, 1898, Nikola Tesla came and said to the world press, he was very famous because he take the electricity from the Niagara Falls to New York. So all the world came to the Colorado Springs, and he had his Tesla tower with scalar waves, and 42 kilometers away light bulbs without any cable. And then he put on the switch and shoof, the bulbs burned, because he sent electricity to the air with scalar waves. So then you would suppose, that all the professors in physics say we made a mistake, Maxwell was right. They are both. But they did not so because it was a conspiracy, and until today they deny the scalar waves. And the biggest problem for the professors of physics today is the year 2009 in Germany, the Helmholtz Society, because then they found out there are magnetic monopoles. Ha! Earlier it was not possible for the theory, but then they could show it. And then people who always had said scalar waves exist got on it, especially the leading researcher today, that is Professor Konstantin Meil in Germany, in Schwarzwald. And he was, after 2009, invited to international conferences because of his research on scalar waves. So there you had...
and let me understand, so can scalar waves be used to control other people's thinking?
Because
how does that work?
Because when we think, we use scalar waves. Our thoughts are scalar waves. And they are quicker than light. Einstein lied to us horribly. And that is shrinking the physics also, and the professors are so stupid that they don't detect it, these physics professors. Those are... and
you have a homepage where you have a lot of evidence and proof of what you're saying here.
This is Professor Meil, which is I think the reincarnation of Nikola Tesla. He says no, but for me it's totally clear. He came to my summer house in Sweden 2013. And after we made very important interviews 1 year ago, and he taught me very lot. I really made physics teaching because of him and the scalar waves. And then he came to my summer house in cottage in Sweden here, and he showed me his experiment, which everybody can buy for 800 euros, how that scalar waves exist. But don't think that this is expected, because the scalar waves are connected to free energy, and this we must not know. So that's a problem, and we must not know how they make mind control and how to fight against it.
So I've read about a lot of these patents and so on. So I mean, how strong are they? Can we fight against it? Do we have a chance? What do you think will happen over the next year? Because I think there's a lot of mind control going on right now. We have all this evidence against, for example, vaccinations and against the 5G systems, and people are just accepting it. They seem to me to be mind control. Can we fight it? What should we do? Have you got any ideas about this?
I am the first in the free world coming with one advice, and that is homeopathic gold. Homeopathy is working with the interference of scalar waves. therefore this dual medicine says it's rubbish because there are no reactions on the molecular level. That is right, because after the potential D20, there are only wave patterns in those small balls you take. And the higher they get, the more intensive the wave patterns are. That means they are working with physics, with interference of scalar waves. And so our body is working. So the most doctors are very stupid. They think our body is only working with chemicals, moleculars. No, it's working with scalar waves, giving impulses and signals and orders from scalar waves quicker than light, and then the result will be a chemical reaction. That means if you take scalar waves and physics in medicine, you are much better in your results. You can fight cancer and everything. And therefore homeopathy is always so successful.
And that's why they fight against it, probably, I would guess. But sure. I'm thinking, realistically, we're not going to go out and convince a population, if they are under mind control and they believe in allopathic medicine, we're not going to go out and convince them to take the cure, right? So what are we going to do?
But the mind control victims who call me every day or write me every day, because I made research since 10 years and I am known that I sometimes can come up with solutions. When they test the homeopathic gold, some of them have relief, and some of them only some months, and then they go round about it. It is very difficult. And the other thing is, which we now tested only since a year ago, is that there are two Tesla boxes constructed by Professor Meyer, and when you sit between them, they build up a special field with scalar waves, and this influences the scalar waves coming in for mind control. Oops, you can't shield against them because they go through everything, the earth and so on, as I told earlier. But you can change their properties, their qualities, and therefore you get relief. But these two boxes cost 3,000 euros, and the most mind control people who that know to be under mind control, to train the computers, the first thing they do, they strip them of the money. So they have not the money to buy this. Therefore we should organize that people with money buy those, and every town has 1 or 2 stations where people can come and sit for 2 hours between those Tesla boxes and get rid of the mind control, and you need it to do every day or every second day.
So there are solutions, yes, basically.
But they are just now very expensive.
So are you an optimist about this the near future?
Yes, because I had been to the United Nations about 1 year ago to the Swiss law professor Melzer, Niels Melzer. He has a Swedish mother, spoke Swedish with that, and he made a call for all the mind control victims in 2019 to come with their reports to him. And then he made a summary and said, this is real, they are not crazy, because the psychiatry is working together with the mind control people and making definitions. You are crazy when you have this and this symptoms of mind control. It's a huge conspiracy. But he looked through that and said, that is rubbish, they are not sick, they are victims of cyber torture. So he came with a new expression and said, this kind of mind control is cyber torture. And this is a very, very good word. But nobody wrote about it, only the Oxford Journal. And me, of course, and some specialists. But I am totally blocked on Google and so on, so people don't find me.
I think it's very important work you're doing, Henning, and I'm sure we'll talk more about it in the future. So, but I have another question for you as well, okay, yeah. Because in what also made me wake up to reality was all the illegal wars, Operation Gladio, Gulf of Tonkin, all the false flags. And I know that you have, with our mutual very good friend Håkan Bergmark and other people, been involved with the Estonia tragedy. MS, the ferry, where was it 3,000 people who died?
No, about 1,000.
Just 1,000?
Yeah, it's
okay.
a little bit less. Nobody knows, because there were containers with refugees and so on.
What was your relationship with this incident? What can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, it was a ferry between the Tallinn, the capital of Estonia, a Baltic country, former under Russian suppression or Soviet suppression, and Stockholm, the capital of Sweden. And in the deepest part of the Baltic Sea, it sank. And officially it was an accident by, they said, bad construction and things like that. And then that was in September 94, and about February 95, the biggest Swedish newspaper came to me and wanted to get a legal opinion whether the product liability against the shipbuilder, the German Meyer yard, is still existing or not, because I'm basically a German lawyer working in Sweden.
Yes.
And then I made a legal opinion and said, yes, you still can sue the Meyer yard. And then in the studio from a television where I also told that there were next of kins, and the biggest society for the next of kins associations were people from 17 different countries. And they said, oh Henning, that's good, we have to go down to the Meyer yard, can you help us? And so I got in, and then I started in 96 litigation for 1,000 victims against the shipbuilder, the Meyer yard, the Bureau Veritas, the guys giving certificates. It's like car control for ships sitting in Paris, and the Swedish Maritime Administration sitting in Sweden, because they made very sloppy controls. And the first thing we wanted is a new dive. And Sweden said, no, there's a ban on diving, but it is international water, so it was not so easy. France had not signed that. And therefore we should have got it, but we didn't, because of political interference from Sweden, and I think also MI6 behind the curtain. And the judge in France, in Paris, didn't follow the law. We did not get.
So there were no dive down there at all?
No.
Nobody dived down there?
Also, it was officially dives in December 94, also only about 3 months after the sinking, controlled by the Swedish Maritime Administration, but they cheated. They said we are not allowed to go to the car deck, and we have pictures they were on the car deck and so on. So, and there was a huge hole in the hull which Håkan Bergmark saw, and I can...
So Håkan Bergmark was a diver?
Military diver.
Diver from that, yeah.
Yeah, and he saw that hole in the hull, and he is an explosives expert. He said the bending of the metal outwards, it was bombs.
It was a bomb.
They blew it up.
So we have a witness.
Yes, and then I can show from the official material on my film on YouTube, the big secret hole on Estonia, that there is a hole in the front where the cameras went in. And after that, the Swedish Maritime Administration gave the order to close the hole under the water, to cheat the people. And this is by a whistleblower in Sweden, and the Meyer yard themselves made research on it. So this is proven now that they closed the hole.
Has there been any consequences to any of the perpetrators?
No.
No.
Because my litigation in Paris was influenced by political powers and secret services as MI6, and the result was, after 23 years, I got the verdict, the first instance, in July 19th, 2019. And they said, no, you are not successful. They applied Swedish law, and I went to Paris to avoid the Swedish law, because the Swedish law is the most primitive when it comes to damages and product liability.
Okay.
So, and now not all verdicts have been sent to the people here in Sweden. There are still people contacting me. I just got something from Paris. What is that? After 25 years now. So that's a huge scandal.
And do you have any idea why they blew up Estonia?
Yes. It was originally planned by the Swedish Military Secret Service, because when they investigated the Palme murder, they saw, oh, the whole police is controlled by foreign powers. And not with anyone but Mossad. And Mossad is not Israel's secret service, but the Bank Houth Rothschild secret service. So they found out Mossad is controlling the Swedish police, and therefore the drugs are flourishing here, because on the pyramid of the drug money is the Mossad. in the Western world. And therefore, they influence high police chiefs in a lot of countries that the drugs are going free because they want to have the money for their black ops. And then there was a conference with about 70 police chiefs in Tallinn. All those guys, those corrupt guys from the Mossad control. And then they said, we are at war because this is a foreign power. We have to liberate us. And of course there are innocent people dying, but this is in every war. If we don't do anything, it will be more people dying. And this plan was...
so did they try to kill someone that was on the boat?
Yes, they wanted
so who did they try to kill?
Those policemen being under Mossad control, those corrupt police chiefs, which have destroyed the police totally.
So who do you think wanted to kill those corrupt police men?
The Swedish military secret service.
I see.
But one of their agents told it to MI6, and then they overruled that. They swapped the policemen to civil police workers without any importance, and then they put in a lot of other things that you shall then fall over. For example, bad maintenance from the bad construction from the Maya yard to build it, and so on.
Construction from what? Sorry.
The Maya yard, the shipbuilder.
Yeah.
And so it was overruled, and then the agents from the military secret service who were on board and helped to with that, they were declared officially dead, but not. They were kidnapped to London, and then the rest of the military secret service had to collapse because they said, if you don't do what we do, we kill your guys. In the one case, father. And since that, the Mossad got total control over the whole Sweden, and also the mind control technology. Sweden is, besides US and Russia, the leading country in developing the mind control technology, the Human Brain Project from the European Union. The biggest money pot in the European Union is here in Sweden, Karolinska Institute in Solna. And before, the Swedish military had partly control over it. After Estonia, they lost it. Now, the mind control technology is totally under Mossad also, and therefore you have this mess in Sweden.
Therefore you have this
mess in Sweden.
Yes.
Today there is a shooting in Gothenburg with parts of the ISIS army, because Mossad started and created and controls ISIS. They control the Swedish secret police, and therefore nothing was done that 10 or 20 or 30 or 40,000, we don't know, from those guys come into Sweden from 2015, 16 and on. And look to the films today. They look military, all black clothes, very nice haircut, very disciplined. This is an army they put into Sweden to crack Sweden.
How many do you think they have here?
About 40,000.
Really?
It's very difficult to say.
That's
because the Swedish Secret Service, SÄPO, is controlled by Mossad, so they don't tell. They just open the gates. Some of them try to fight against, but they are not so mighty.
I see. So you are really covering a lot of ground here. You're covering money creation, which is a huge magic trick,
yeah,
and a scam to rob the people. And you're covering the mind control, which is basically how they are controlling, allowing people to voluntarily tag along with all these crimes against humanity. You're also an expert in these false flag operations. Are there anything else you are working on at the moment you want to tell us about?
Pedophile network. I just want to crack a pedophile network here in Sweden. But I started getting an eye-opener from the Estonia case, because in the beginning every prostitute flew with me to Paris when there was litigation on Estonia, and then people came to me, journalists, survivors and so on, and said, Henning, they are lying, it was not an accident, they blew it up. And then I sat with my technical expert, a shipbuilder, at home here in Stockholm in Christmas time, '98, and we controlled the official film material from the Swedish Maritime Administration, from the Swedish Commission looking on the Estonia, and we found 2 packages being bombs, not exploded. In the beginning we were stunned, but then we got we went to experts in Sweden and Germany, And they all said, well, okay, it's on the film, but there's a bombs not exploded. And then I tried to publish that, and it was not possible. And the media in Sweden made the cover-up in a very organized way. So I saw this is organized. This is not only one journalist working. All the journalists are working with the same kind of covering up. And then I found out the organization is from the psychological warfare team from the military secret service in Sweden. Psykförsvaret. And then I wrote that in my book, 99, and some years later they were off. And somebody told me, because you exposed them in your book, they had to take them away. Now they are another authority, Myndigheten för samhällsskydd och beredskap, which also is now involved in the vaccine scandal, a COVID scandal, and so on. But to the election next year, 22, in January, they start a new authority for the psychological warfare people. So that went a little bit underground, and now they're coming up again.
Okay.
As usual.
Well, this is it's been very interesting, Henning. Are there anything else you want to tell our viewers?
No, I think it will be too long.
It'll be too long. Thanks a lot, Henning. It was good to see you again. Yeah.